Hi guys, and welcome to the channel. Hillbilly Military Modeling here. Today we got our Merkava by Tamiya in 1/35 scale. This will be the build video for this kit. We'll be concentrating first on steps 1, 2, and 3. That'll be the road wheels, the rear panel for the upper hull, and then the lower hull parts as well. First thing we have to do, of course, is to separate all of our road wheels from our sprues. Now, I'm using my brand new pair of sprue cutters from Tamiya. So with our road wheels, we need to go ahead and sand off our little sprue gates, and there is a line that runs around where the mold separation is. Assembly of the road wheels is very simple. Just don't forget your poly caps, a little bit of glue, and all we have to do is just press the parts together. So the road wheels are not keyed, but as you can see here on the idler, it is a spoked assembly and it is keyed. Now it assembles the same way as our road wheels with the poly cap. And just make sure that you line your keyway up, press it together, and you're ready to go. And we have the same thing with the drive sprocket. It is a keyed assembly as well. But there is just a little bit of play, so once we glue this up, we're going to make sure that we have good alignment of the sprocket teeth. Just make sure that they're really lined up across from one another. So now we're attaching grab handles onto our rear panel. They are a little fiddly, but they go on. So this rear panel also has our rear fender extensions there. And those are already made into the part. And we're attaching some accessory boxes that also hold our tail lights. And it's nice to see that the tail lights are nicely molded in. So the assembly of this rear panel is not a problem. There's no issues with it. Alright, next up is going to be putting our stretcher onto the rear panel. Now, you might want to leave this part off. It would make painting easier for you. Continuing on to step 3, we're going to attach our final drive housings. And there aren't any fit issues with these. They go on just as you would expect. And this will be our idler wheel bracket and slack adjuster. Now on the side of the hull we have volute type bump stops, and that's what I'm going to be attaching here. So there's 2 for each bogie, and there's 6 bogies. So that'll be 12 of these little bump stops we'll put on. And we'll also put on our support rollers. So next up are steps 4, 5, and 6. Now Tamiya wants us to put the road wheels on our bogies first before settling it to the hull, but I find it's easier to go ahead and we'll put our bogies on the hull first. And of course we do put the support rollers on. Now there is a slight overlap right here on the back of the hull, which I scraped down with my knife. It's a small fit issue, but it's easily taken care of. And once our bogies are all set in place, we can go ahead and install our road wheels, which will help us with the alignment of our side skirt brackets, which we're going to be putting on next. Now there is a small issue with our brackets. It seems to be a mold offset. And as you can see here, how it kind of looks like it's diagonal. It's kind of unusual for Tamiya kits to have this kind of defect, but there it is. But we're not going to worry a whole lot about it. We're just going to go ahead and clean these up real good. And I'm going to use this thick Tamiya cement. It has plenty of body in the glue, so with our road wheels installed, this is going to help us actually center our brackets to make sure that they're at 90 degrees to the side of the hull. Now the thick glue works really good because when you stick the part on there, it just holds it into place. And we just want to make sure our alignment's right. Yeah, there we go. Only got 3 more to go. So next up we'll be concentrating on the upper hull assembly. And here I'm installing the rear compartment vent cover. And this step we'll be putting on the toolboxes, which I've already got on right here. And there are 2 side armor plates, as well as the driver's hatch. Now I'm putting my finger right in the middle of the hatch to hold it into place. That way when I glue this up from the inside, if some Tamiya extra thin finds its way to the outside, I don't have a big fingerprint. And we've all had those ugly fingerprints. So next up we're going to look at putting our headlights on. So on this vehicle, you can either have the headlights in the exposed position or in the combat position. I'll be putting them in the combat position. So that means on the right fender here, there's an armored plate that swings up over top of the lenses on the headlight assembly. And I do have to fit this plate a little bit to get it to go up like it's supposed to. But it's just a small issue. It's nothing big. And I think the fit issue is mainly because the part has a slight taper on the edge, just from the mold. Now on the opposite side, this headlight folds down, and so we're going to have it in the down position, which means this compartment hatch is going to be closed, or compartment door. And so I'm just going to glue this in the closed position, and we don't have to worry about painting any headlights anyway. So, now there aren't a whole lot of parts that goes to the upper hull. Just these side panels, toolboxes. We've got our lifting eyes for the rear deck, the vent, hatch, our gun travel lock, and this side vent right here. So, and they all fit really well, so there aren't any issues there. So next we're going to test fit our gun barrel or gun tube. And even though this is a Tamiya kit, make sure that you test fit. Okay. Yeah, you got to remember, guys, that if you're building a tank, if the gun tube, the main armament of the vehicle, isn't a convincing look, if you've got a big ugly seam line or something like that on it, then it's not going to be a convincing scale model. So you need to take extra care with this. So after determining that there aren't any alignment issues with it, I just start gluing it up at one end, and we'll just travel down the barrel, making sure that everything gets lined up as we go. and making sure that at our joint seam the barrel halves match. I'm just going to clamp it into place using these clothespins. They come in handy. Just to make sure that we don't have any offset. I would hate to set this aside and come back later and find out that for some reason it decided to move and the halves are not glued up the way we want them. So we do have a piece here to go on the end. This is the muzzle representation for the gun tube. Minor cleanup for it, and it's ready to go on. So this is the breech portion of our gun tube. It has a canvas cover. So we're just going to carefully glue it together. It's just two pieces. So next we're going to take a look at our bustle rack and also the screen mesh that goes on the bottom of the bustle rack. Here I've assembled the bustle rack. There's no issues with the assembly of that. So, and it can be a little bit fiddly though. But most of the time my hands were in the way and you couldn't see what I was doing anyway. So I couldn't see what I was doing. So anyway, we're gonna look at this screen. What I did was I made a copy of the instructions. And here we're just going to cut out the pattern. So Tamiya has provided this pattern. This is a 1-to-1 ratio. And I'm just going to cut right on the very edge of the outline on this pattern. And it's supposed to be the exact size that we need to cut our screen at. And we're going to want to test fit this to the part to make sure that the pattern fits the part. If you need to make an adjustment, then now would be the time to do it. But it seems to fit pretty good, so I'm just going to work with that. So what I've done here is to sandwich the pattern between some blue painter's tape and the mesh screen that we're going to cut. And being very careful, we're going to cut the inside arc of this first because that's the hardest cut to make. And then we'll do the long outside curve. And with those two cuts done, all we got to do is clip the ends of it. Being careful to make sure that we follow our pattern. And then the screen mesh will just come free and we can test fit that and make sure that it's okay. So I do have to clip out a little bit around the brackets and then I glue it into place. I'm just using Tamiya Extra Thin to attach it to the bottom of the bustle rack, and it looks pretty good. So next up are steps 7 and 8, which have to do with our turret. So the first thing we need to do is to install the clear pieces for our periscope and also our gun optics. And then we're going to test fit our upper and lower sections of our turret. And as you can see here, there are large spaces that we're going to have to deal with here. We'll have to squeeze this together and glue these in place and hold them until they take. And there is a sink mark right here on the back of the turret bustle. And also the lower portion of the turret wants to spring away from the upper section of the turret on both sides. And there's also a protrusion right there on the corner. And we have gaps in the front, so we're gonna have to deal with all this. As you can see right here where it doesn't match very well, After glue up, I will trim that up. Now on the sides of the turret are these real light lines that are cast into it, and these are for the location of the parts that goes on the side of the turret, and we've got these on both sides. So when we go to do some filling and sanding on our seam for our upper and lower turret, we're going to have to make sure that we don't eliminate those. And right there is that corner that we're going to cut out. So here I'm just going to take my hobby knife and very carefully trim off all this that's hanging out on the corner here. Being careful to follow the lines of the turret there. And once we get the bulk of that cleaned up, we'll be able to go in and use our filler. So I'm using this Tamiya putty, and it sets up really quick. Unlike the testers that I've been using in the past, this does set up fast, which allows us to go ahead and sand this much sooner. So I do like it when I'm able to keep my build moving along. So I'm just using a toothpick here to apply, especially here in the sink mark on the back of the turret and right down the edge. Now most of this will probably sand away and we'll buff that out. I just want to make sure that I've got it filled so that I don't have to come back in and refill it, because sometimes, you know, it's necessary to do that. But we want to minimize the amount of times we have to go back and use filler. Now we also have pretty good gaps here on the bottom front of the turret, and so I'm going to go ahead and fill those as well, because that can be seen from the front of the vehicle. So once all that dries, we just come in and use our polishing stick and give it a little rough sanding, and we'll use a little bit finer polishing stick to smooth it all out. Now we do need to be cautious, remember, about the indicator lines on the sides of the turret. We don't want to polish those away, or we won't be able to figure out where all of our parts go. After I've sanded that, I do come back in on the front here and use some Mr. Surfacer 500 just to fill up some small little gaps and voids that was in the putty on the front lower of the turret. Now we're going to turn our attention to these lifting eyes that goes on the side of the turret. As you can see here, the holes are kind of tapered, meaning that they're smaller on one side than they are on the opposite. So I just find a drill bit that fits the larger side, and we're just going to drill these out. So when the drill bit passes through, it's going to leave a little burr on one side. So I'm using a slightly larger drill bit and very lightly spinning it over the exit hole. And that'll just deburr that for us, and that will clean that hole up and make it nice and tidy for us. So I just need to do the other lifting eye. So when it comes to attaching all these little parts on the turret, probably the fiddliest of them all are going to be these hinges. So there's 2 hinges per door and 3 doors per side. And also we're going to attach our spare track sections. There are 4 of these that we have to install on the turret. And that would be 2 per side. So we're going to move on to step 9 and 10. Now we're going to save actually step 9 till later and just move straight on to 10, which is the assembly of our tracks. And then we'll be able to put our hull halves together. So the first thing we need to do is attach our tracks. So these are the rubber band style tracks. They have 4 little pins that we're going to have to melt over. It kind of makes them into a rivet that holds them together. And Tamiya has been doing tracks this way forever. So I think if I can get the pins in the holes, we'll be doing all right. So I'm lucky to have a vise in my little workshop, so I'm just closing it up so that the center guides on the track have a place to sit. And I'm just going to use this tool to hold it down. And then I've got a nail that I heat up and use just to flatten out the pins on the track. Very lightly, just press them down. And once you get all 4 of them melted and pressed down, that's what we end up with. Now these tracks are fairly nice, so we're going to go ahead and use these. So next thing to do would be to install our tracks. So I'm just going to pull off our idlers here. And we're going to check to make sure that our track is running in the right direction. And just simply install it over the drive sprockets. And then we'll take our idlers, put it on the track and stretch it down to the idler pin and just press them on. So we want to check the fit to make sure that everything is going to line up correctly and that there's not too much tension on these tracks, which cause our running gear to kind of bow out of alignment. So I always test fit. And we'll assemble the other side as well. And now we can assemble our upper hull to the lower hull. And we just want to make sure that everything fits well and that there's no gap in the front. That looks pretty good. And this way we'll be able to disassemble it for painting. Now we do have a gap here. I'm gonna have to do something about that gap. But and I don't know if that's because of something I did or if it's a flaw in the kit, but it's just a small thing. So now we're going to attach our side skirts. Feeling confident that we can separate our upper and lower hull and remove our tracks and our road wheels and drive sprockets and idlers for painting. We'll go ahead and align our side skirts. So the most important thing is to get it started at the very front, and that's where it's most critical. And we just run it right down the side of the vehicle and glue it at all of its attachment points. And once that's on, it looks good. It's right where it's supposed to be. So I've already attached the bustle rack here to the turret. Now our main armament, the gun barrel, is not attached or glued, I should say. It's just sitting in place. And so this is kind of where we're at in the build. And next is the problem. And the problem is these tow cables. So the instruction tells us to bend it, and that's what happens when you bend it. So I do super glue that back together, and I try something which you get to see me do it here in real time. Now Tamiya Extra Thin is a really hot glue. It softens the polystyrene plastic, and this Tamiya polystyrene plastic is kind of brittle. So I've taken and put some tape on the corner of the bustle rack because I don't want to glue these cables to the bustle rack yet because it being free allows me to paint it separately. So I'm using the glue here to soften the plastic, and so I'm just going to coat that right on the cable on the corner, right where I want to bend it. And sorry, my hand keeps getting in the way, but I didn't want to edit this part of the video. That way you guys would see exactly how long from start to finish when I started this bending process that it took for me to do this. And so I just want to make sure that I get enough glue on there that the plastic is softened up enough. So when I start to bend, hopefully it doesn't break. So, just a little bit more glue and we should be about ready to go. So in all actuality, it doesn't take long to do this. And I just start pushing on it, kind of testing to see that if it's going to start to conform. And it does, so I just slowly bend it on over, bending it around, and we're just going to snap it into the hook that retains it. And I want to make sure that the cable is in position, and we just let it set up and dry. It's just that simple. So we can use these cables and I don't have to make new ones, and that's a good thing. So here you can see where I've managed to bend it around, even where it was broken, and bend it right around the second corner. So to me, Extra Thin works really good in softening up these cables. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to step 9, which is the assembly of our machine guns. So we have the brackets and the pintle assemblies where the gun sits. And we're going to assemble that. Now we won't glue the machine gun to the bracket. That'll just make it easier for painting. So we're just going to take and press it into place. And we'll set that on top of the turret where it belongs. And then next is the machine gun for our loader. Now we're going to go back and look at these hinges. There's two halves that are missing, and this is the headlight hatch, I guess you can call it. I'm not sure. But if we look at all the other hinges on the model, they are a complete hinge assembly. There's two parts to it, top and a bottom. But on our toolboxes, that detail is missing, and I imagine that's because of the molding process. So what we're going to do is we're going to add that hinge detail. And as you can see here, I'm using the 0.25 millimeter thick polystyrene sheet, which I cut into a 1 millimeter wide strip. And then I cut these off in 2 millimeter sections. And we'll just set that on top of the toolbox and check to make sure. So we got a bunch of strips that we need to cut up and glue in place. So here I've already done that. I didn't want to put you through me doing each and every one because there's quite a few of them. We're going to let that set up and dry completely, and we'll come back to it and add the whole detail to it later. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to address this gap that we have. And so I find some scrap styrene sheet that I'm going to use to fill that gap. And as you can see here, it is the 0.50 millimeter thick polystyrene sheet that I'm going to use. So I cut me off 2 pieces and glued that into place. And once it's set up nice and firm, I'm going to take my sprue cutters and just trim off the excess. And then we'll come in with our hobby knife and trim it down real close, and then I'll just sand it nice and flush. So with that done, that looks pretty good. And now we don't have that great big gap there, which would be somewhat of an eyesore. So now that our hinge halves have dried completely, I just size up one of my small bits and use that to put the hole details into the hinges. And after doing that to all of our hinges, we're pretty much done. Okay guys, post-build review. Actually, I really like this kit. It's a nice kit. First of all, we'll go through the cons instead of the pros. Turret fit, not great, but it's nothing that you can't deal with. A little bit of patience and a little bit of filler and you're good to go there. Also, the Lexan clear plastic sheet that they use for periscopes and the, I guess, thermal sight and stuff. Yeah, to me, you could have done better there. That's just awful. So, and then last but not least is the tow cables. Yeah, plastic tow cables are always an issue, and I wish Tamiya would do something else about that. Now, pros, well, excellent detail. The upper hull detail is great on this kit. The assembly is straightforward. It's really not a tremendous amount of parts to assemble. It's definitely a weekend kit in my opinion, and if you haven't built one of these, go ahead and build it. And it's a big tank. It's huge, so I think you'll enjoy it. And so that will wrap up this video, guys. I really appreciate you watching. Special thanks to all my subscribers. You guys are great. You're the reason why I keep making these little videos for you. Also, if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, but you like the content, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next video when I post. I post every Friday, so you'll be sure to have something to watch. So look out for those. Next video will be the painting, so I'm going to have to get to work so that you guys will have something next week to see. So stay safe, and I will see you guys in the next video.